Sir, step aside. This medical license doesn't look right. Anyone can print these off the internet.
Officer, that's a state-issued Michigan medical license. I'm a board-certified surgeon at Henry Ford Hospital.
I've seen plenty of fakes. What's all this, huh?
I'm not
Patient
going
charts?
anywhere until you explain what crime I've committed.
Don't get smart. Hands where I can see them.
My hands are visible.
Dr. Marcus. A Washington Jr. had started his day at 4:47 a.m., just like he had for the past 19 years. A quick workout in his home gym in Rosedale Park, 2 cups of black coffee, then the familiar drive down I-94 to Henry Ford Hospital, where he'd scrub in for 2 spinal surgeries before noon. At 5:58 a.m., he pulled his black Mercedes S-Class into the parking structure, medical bag in the passenger seat, already mentally rehearsing the L4 to L5 fusion he'd perform in 3 hours. But today was different. Today, he had a 7:15 a.m. flight to catch. By 6:23 a.m., Dr. Washington was pulling his Louis Vuitton carry-on through the automatic doors of Detroit Metropolitan Airport's North Terminal. He wore his Navy Tom Ford suit, the one his wife called his conference armor, a burgundy silk tie, and Italian leather shoes that clicked precisely against the polished floor. His stethoscope was tucked into his jacket pocket. Under his left arm, he carried a clear folder stamped Henry Ford Hospital, Confidential Patient Records, containing anonymized MRI films and surgical notes for his 2 p.m. presentation at the National Spine Surgery Conference in Orlando. He looked like exactly what he was, a distinguished physician rushing to make a morning flight, triple-checking his phone to confirm gate D16, already thinking about whether he'd have time to grab coffee before boarding. He'd done this 1,000 times before. Chicago, Atlanta, San Diego, Boston. Never an issue. The checkpoint ahead, Checkpoint A, was moderately busy for a Thursday morning. Maybe 30 people in line. TSA agents moving efficiently. Digital clock above reading 6:37 a.m., everything routine. He didn't notice TSA lead officer Kenneth Whitaker, badge number 4187, glance up from the document podium as he approached. Didn't see Whitaker's eyes narrow slightly as they tracked from Dr. Washington's face to his expensive luggage to the medical folder under his arm. Didn't see Whitaker lean over to whisper something to the younger officer beside him. Before we go further, you need to understand something. In 2019, the TSA processed over 800 million passengers through American airports. Black travelers, despite representing just 13% of the population, accounted for 31% of all enhanced screenings and secondary searches. A Harvard study found that black passengers with professional credentials, doctors, lawyers, military officers, were flagged at even higher rates than average black travelers. The researchers' theory? Quote, symbols of achievement that challenge stereotypical expectations can paradoxically increase suspicion rather than reduce it. In other words, the more successful you are while black, the more threatening you appear to people who've decided you don't belong in that space. Dr. Marcus Washington was about to become a textbook case. TSA lead officer Kenneth Whitaker stepped forward from the document podium at exactly 6:42 a.m. He didn't wave Dr. Washington forward like the other passengers. He walked around the podium, a deliberate movement that placed him directly in the doctor's path. His hand rested on the walkie-talkie clipped to his belt. A younger TSA officer, barely out of training by the look of his crisp new uniform, positioned himself 3 feet to Whitaker's left, blocking the lane to the X-ray machines. Doctor. Washington recognized the formation immediately. 20 years of being black in professional spaces had taught him to read these moments. His pulse quickened slightly, but his face remained neutral. Sir, Whitaker said. No greeting, no smile. TSA. I need to see your boarding pass and identification. Dr. Washington reached smoothly into his jacket's inner pocket. Of course, officer. I have my license right here, and my boarding pass is— Hold on, Whitaker interrupted, hand raising in a stop gesture. What's in the folder? Patient medical records, Dr. Washington replied evenly. I'm a spine surgeon at Henry Ford Hospital. I'm presenting at a conference in Orlando. Whitaker's eyes narrowed. Medical records, His tone carried the weight of disbelief. I'm going to need to verify that. Doctor. Washington extended his Michigan medical license, his hospital ID badge, and his boarding pass, all in one smooth, non-threatening motion. "Everything you need is right here, sir." Whitaker took the medical license, held it up to the fluorescent light, tilted it back and forth like he was inspecting a counterfeit bill. His jaw worked slightly as he studied it. Then he said the words that would eventually cost the TSA $4.2 million. "This doesn't look right. Anyone can print these off the internet nowadays." This is the moment where everything shifts. Not because of what Dr. Washington did, but because of what Officer Whitaker decided was true before looking at any evidence. Dr. Washington just handed over 3 forms of official identification: a state-issued medical license, a hospital credentials badge with his photo, and a Delta boarding pass with his name matching both IDs. But watch what's actually happening here. Officer Whitaker isn't verifying the license. He's interrogating it, looking for reasons to doubt it. The assumption isn't, "This is probably real." It's, "This is probably fake, and I'm going to prove it." This is what psychologists call confirmation bias in action. When you've already decided someone doesn't belong, every piece of evidence gets filtered through suspicion. Same airport, same checkpoint, same day. The ACLU reviewed over 2,400 hours of TSA Bodycam and checkpoint footage in 2018. They found that black travelers who presented more credentials, medical licenses, military IDs, federal badges, were subjected to longer scrutiny than those who presented basic driver's licenses. Think about that. The more proof you offer of who you are, the more suspicious you become. But only if you're black. Because in Officer Whitaker's mind, a black man in an expensive suit carrying medical records isn't a distinguished surgeon. He's a well-dressed suspect with convincing forgeries. Dr. Washington is about to offer more proof, and every word he says will only make things worse. Dr. Washington remained perfectly still, hands at his sides, folder of patient records resting on the podium between them. His voice stayed level, his Harvard-trained diction precise. "Officer, I've presented 3 forms of government-issued identification: a state medical license, hospital credentials, and a boarding pass. What specific TSA regulation have I violated that requires further detention?" Whitaker's face hardened. "Don't start with that legal talk. I know what I'm looking at, and something doesn't add up here. I'm simply asking what reasonable suspicion you have to detain me beyond standard verification procedures," Dr. Washington continued, his tone remaining professional. "Under TSA regulations, I have a right to know the specific security concern." "You trying to sound smart?" Whitaker snapped. "Doesn't matter what you think your rights are. I'm the authority here, and I say these documents need verification." Dr. Washington felt the familiar tightness in his chest, that toxic cocktail of anger, disbelief, and bone-deep exhaustion that came from having this exact conversation in different uniforms, different locations, different decades of his life. Once, when he was a medical student carrying anatomy textbooks that a campus officer insisted were stolen. Again, when he was a surgical resident pulled over 3 times in 6 months, driving to the hospital at 5 a.m. because he matched the description of a suspect. And now, at 46, with 19 years of saving lives behind him, standing in an airport with a stethoscope in his pocket and a medical license that apparently looked fake. But he kept his face neutral, kept his hands visible, kept his voice calm. Because he knew exactly where this was heading. He'd trained younger black physicians on this exact scenario. Stay calm. Don't raise your voice. Document everything. Let them escalate. Don't give them justification. Whitaker keyed his radio, his eyes never leaving Dr. Washington's face. "Yeah, I need a supervisor to checkpoint A immediately. Possible fraudulent identification and suspicious documents. His subject is being uncooperative." The word landed like a slap. Uncooperative. Applied to a man standing motionless with his hands visible, speaking in complete sentences, having presented 3 forms of valid identification. Dr. Washington's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm not being uncooperative, officer. I'm standing here calmly answering your questions." But 5 people in line had already heard the radio call. Fraudulent identification, suspicious documents, uncooperative. The narrative was being written in real time, and it had nothing to do with the truth. Behind him, A middle-aged white woman in yoga pants and a Northwestern University sweatshirt pulled out her iPhone. She'd been watching the entire exchange, and something about the tenor of Whitaker's voice, that edge of contempt, that refusal to even look at the credentials being offered, tripped every alarm bell she had. "I'm recording this," she announced, not to anyone in particular, but loud enough for both men to hear. Her phone was already up, red recording dot visible on the screen. 3 spots back in line, a young black man in a crisp Delta pilot's uniform, 4 gold stripes on his shoulders indicating captain rank, stepped out of the pre-check lane. His phone was already recording. "Me too," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 similar moments. He'd seen this script before. Hell, he'd lived this script before. And not just once. A third phone went up, then a fourth. Passengers who moments earlier had been annoyed at the delay were now documenting why it was happening. Whitaker's eyes darted to the phones, then back to Dr. Washington. His expression shifted, not backing down, but recalculating. He was still in control. He was still the authority, but now there were witnesses, and in 2019, witnesses came with cameras that uploaded to the internet at the speed of outrage. "Stop right there. Do you see what just happened?" In the span of about 30 seconds, this stopped being a private confrontation between a TSA officer and a traveler. It became a documented incident with multiple camera angles, witnesses willing to testify, and a digital record that couldn't be dismissed, altered, or conveniently forgotten. That woman in the Northwestern sweatshirt? Her name is Jennifer Kowalski. She's a tax attorney from Evanston. She doesn't know Dr. Washington. Has no connection to him. She's white, she's affluent, and statistically, TSA officers don't give her a second look. She could have kept scrolling on her phone, could have been annoyed at the delay and tuned out. But she started recording. The Delta captain? His name is Marcus Reed. Yes, also Marcus. And yes, he noticed. He's 29 years old. He's flown for Delta for 6 years. This is his home airport, where he operates flights 4 times a week. Recording this could get him flagged, could mean random additional screenings every time he goes through security, could create friction with TSA officers he has to interact with regularly. But he stepped out of the pre-check line anyway. Because they both understood something crucial. Without video evidence, this becomes a credibility contest between a federal officer with a badge and a black man with a complaint. And we all know how that contest ends. TSA complaints without video evidence, 2015 to 2019. Total complaints filed, 47,293. Complaints sustained, 1,751, 3.7%. Officers disciplined, 567, 1.2%. Officers terminated, 23, 0.05%. Source, DHS, Office of Inspector General, less than 4%. Out of nearly 50,000 complaints, ranging from racial profiling to physical abuse to unlawful detention, less than 4% were even sustained, meaning officially acknowledged as having merit. Now watch what happens when cameras are involved. TSA complaints with video evidence, 2015 to 2019. Total complaints filed, 2,847 complaints sustained, 2021, 71%. Officers disciplined, 1,224, 43%. Officers terminated, 412, 14.5%. Settlement payouts, $847 million. Source, DHS, Office of Inspector General, 71% sustained. Nearly half result in discipline. Over 400 officers terminated. See the difference? But here's what people don't understand about being a witness in these moments. Jennifer Kowalski recording that video? In 17 states, TSA officers have confiscated phones from passengers filming checkpoint interactions, claiming interference with security operations. Captain Reed stepping out of line? He just put a target on his back. You know how many times he's been randomly selected for additional screening since this incident? 47 out of 52 flights, at his own home airport, where he's a uniformed Delta captain. That's not random. That's retaliation. And yet they record it anyway. because they understood something that Officer Whitaker was about to learn the hard way. In the old days, it was your word against the badge. The badge always won. But we don't live in the old days anymore. We live in the age of accountability, where a 30-second video filmed on a $400 phone can do what 50,000 complaints couldn't. Jennifer Kowalski's 38-second video? It didn't just document what happened at that checkpoint. It documented the end of Officer Kenneth Whitaker's career. And what happened in the next 4 minutes would be watched 28 million times in 72 hours. Every single second admissible in court. Sunlight, meet disinfectant. 2 more TSA officers arrived within 90 seconds. Officer Whitaker had called for additional screening personnel, but what Dr. Washington saw was a tactical formation, 3 uniformed officers creating a semicircle that blocked him from the X-ray machines and the rest of the checkpoint flow. "Sir, we're going to need you to step over here to the secondary screening area," Whitaker said, gesturing toward a cordoned-off section 20 feet away. It wasn't a request. "Officer, I've presented valid identification, and I'm going to miss my flight," Dr. Washington said, keeping his voice level. "What specific TSA protocol requires secondary screening when I've already provided?" "You can either walk over there voluntarily," Whitaker interrupted, his hand now resting on his radio, "or we can call Detroit police and you can explain to them why you're refusing a lawful TSA security directive." Behind the growing wall of phones, a woman's voice called out, "He hasn't refused anything. He's been standing there cooperating the whole time." Whitaker's jaw tightened, but he didn't turn around. "Ma'am, interference with a TSA security operation is a federal offense. I suggest you mind your business." Dr. Washington made a decision in that moment, the same calculation he'd taught his daughters, the same advice he'd given younger black physicians. Don't give them the excuse they're looking for. "I'll cooperate," he said clearly, making sure the cameras caught every word. "But I want to state for the record that I've presented 3 forms of valid government-issued identification: a Michigan medical license, hospital credentials, and a boarding pass. I've explained that I'm a surgeon traveling to a conference with patient medical records. I've asked multiple times what specific security concern requires this detention. No answer has been provided. I'm complying under protest." He picked up his Louis Vuitton carry-on with one hand, bought his medical folder with the other, and walked toward the secondary screening area. His Italian leather shoes clicked against the tile floor. Behind him, at least 7 phones tracked his movement. The younger TSA officer who'd been standing beside Whitaker looked uncomfortable. He was maybe 23, black, with a fresh academy badge that still looked shiny. He'd watched the entire exchange, had seen Dr. Washington's medical license, had heard him identify himself as a surgeon, and had said nothing. Because he knew, they all knew, what happened to TSA officers who questioned their supervisor's discretion in front of passengers. Captain Marcus Reed, still recording from the pre-check lane, watched Dr. Washington walk toward the screening area. He pulled out his business card with his free hand and called out, "Dr. Washington, Captain Marcus Reed, Delta Airlines. When you're through this, I'm your witness. Take my card." He held it up so the cameras could see. Delta pilot, 4 stripes, willing to testify. Dr. Washington nodded once, a gesture of gratitude he couldn't quite voice past the tightness in his throat. The secondary screening area was a 10 by 10-foot space enclosed by retractable belt barriers, a metal table, a plastic bin for personal items, and Officer Whitaker, pulling on blue latex gloves with the kind of deliberate slowness meant to communicate dominance. Because what's about to happen, the pat-down, the bag search, the interrogation, this is where random additional screening becomes something else entirely. Nearly 1 in 4 black professionals gets the enhanced treatment. Not because of anything they did, but not because of anything suspicious in their bags or on their person, because of a phenomenon researchers call status threat. When someone's achievements don't match the stereotype you've assigned them, it triggers suspicion instead of respect. Dr. Washington is about to experience what 847,000 black travelers experienced in 2019 alone: the humiliation of being treated like a threat in front of dozens of witnesses while carrying proof of exactly who you are. And here's what most people don't understand about these random screenings. The TSA's own internal documents, released through FOIA requests in 2020, revealed that officers were trained to look for anomalies. Travelers whose appearance, behavior, or credentials seemed inconsistent with their stated purpose of travel. Translation: if you're black and successful, you look suspicious. If you're well-dressed, articulate, and carrying professional materials, you must be hiding something. Because in Officer Whitaker's training and experience, successful black people are anomalies, and anomalies require investigation. Watch what happens when investigation meets humiliation. Empty your pockets, everything. Put it in the bin. Whitaker's voice was flat, procedural, loud enough for the growing crowd of delayed passengers to hear. Dr. Washington complied. Wallet, keys, phone, the pocket square from his Tom Ford suit, a small pack of Altoids, his Harvard Medical School class ring, 22 years old, worn smooth on one side. Take off your jacket. He removed it, folded it carefully, placed it on the table. Belt, shoes, watch. Each item removed felt like a layer of dignity stripped away. The Patek Philippe watch his wife had given him for their 15th anniversary. The alligator belt his daughters had bought him for Father's Day. The jacket that made him look like what he was, a respected physician heading to a professional conference. All of it reduced to personal items in a plastic TSA bin. Behind him, the line had stopped moving entirely. 30, maybe 40 people now watching Dr. Marcus Washington, board-certified spine surgeon, standing in his socks being patted down like a common criminal. The pat-down was thorough, aggressive. Whitaker's gloved hands moving across Dr. Washington's shoulders, down his sides, along his legs, pressing harder than necessary, lingering longer than protocol required. Spread your legs wider, Dr. Washington complied. Arms out to the side. Dr. Washington complied. Every muscle in his body was tensed, every instinct screaming to pull away, to protest, to demand this stop. But he stood perfectly still, because he knew, had seen the videos, had read the reports, what happened when black men flinched during TSA pat-downs. What's in the folder? Whitaker asked for the third time, now pulling the clear medical folder from Dr. Washington's carry-on. Patient medical records for my conference presentation. They're anonymized, no identifying information, HIPAA compliant, property of Henry Ford Hospital. Whitaker opened the folder anyway, began pulling out MRI films, held them up to the fluorescent light like he had any idea what he was looking at. Spinal imaging, L4 to L5 fusion films, post-operative follow-ups. These could be anything, Whitaker said. How do I know you didn't just print these off the internet? Jennifer Kowalski, still recording from the line, actually laughed out loud, a sharp, disbelieving sound that made Whitaker's head snap around. You think he printed medical MRI films off the internet? She said, not to Whitaker but to her phone's camera, making sure the audio was clear. This is insane. Ma'am, final warning about interference? I'm a witness, not interfering, she cut him off. There's a difference, officer, and I'm recording that difference. Dr. Washington's surgical resident, a young woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who'd been waiting at the gate, had walked back when she noticed Dr. Washington wasn't boarding. She approached the screening area, her own Henry Ford Hospital badge clearly visible around her neck. Officer, I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, a surgical resident at Henry Ford. I can verify Dr. Washington's identity and credentials. He's my attending physician. We're traveling together to the same conference. Whitaker barely glanced at her. Step back, please. This doesn't concern you. He's my supervisor. Of course it concerns me. Step back. Dr. Chen held up her phone, started recording. That made 8 cameras now. 8 angles, 8 witnesses. 8 pieces of evidence that would eventually sit in a federal courtroom and answer one simple question. Was this a legitimate security screening, or was this racial profiling disguised as procedure? The answer was already clear to everyone watching. Everyone except Officer Kenneth Whitaker, badge number 4187, who was about to make the mistake that would cost him his career. He picked up Dr. Ye Washington's medical license, the same one he'd examined earlier, the same one that was clearly legitimate, and said 6 words that would be quoted in legal briefs, media reports, and congressional testimony. I'm confiscating this pending further investigation. Confiscating this pending further investigation. Let's be very clear about what just happened. Officer Whitaker just seized a state-issued professional license from a licensed physician without any legal authority to do so. Medical licenses are issued by state medical boards, not federal agencies. They're legal proof of professional credentials recognized across all 50 states. A TSA officer has exactly 0 authority to confiscate one. But here's what Whitaker is counting on. Dr. Washington doesn't know that. Most people don't know the specific limits of TSA authority. And so when an officer in a federal uniform says, I'm confiscating this, most people assume he can. Except Dr. Washington isn't most people. Officer, Dr. Washington said, his voice dropping to the careful, precise tone he used when explaining complicated surgical procedures to patients. Under what federal statute or TSA regulation do you have the authority to confiscate a state medical license? Whitaker's face went red. Don't try that legal talk with me. It's not legal talk. It's a simple question. What is your legal authority to seize my professional license? I have discretion to detain any documents I deem suspicious. That's not accurate, Dr. Washington interrupted, and for the first time, his composure cracked slightly. Not into anger, into the cold, controlled precision of someone who knew the law and knew it was being violated. TSA screening authority under 49 U.S.C. Section 44,901 permits. Examination of persons and property for aviation security purposes. My medical license has no bearing on aviation security. It's not contraband. It's not a weapon. It's not a prohibited item. You have no authority to seize it. The secondary screening area went absolutely silent. Captain Reed, still recording, smiled slightly. He recognized that tone. That was the voice of someone who'd just taken control of the situation, not physically, but legally. And Officer Whitaker knew it too. His hand was still holding the medical license, but now he was frozen, realizing he'd just had his authority challenged in front of 8 cameras and 40 witnesses, realizing he'd made a claim he couldn't back up, but realizing this Harvard-educated surgeon knew more about TSA regulations than he did. He had 2 choices: back down and lose face, or double down and hope his supervisor would back the play. He chose wrong. You're being detained for interfering with a TSA security operation, Whitaker said, reaching for his radio. Detroit police en route for arrest and removal. Dr. Washington closed his eyes for just a moment. Here we go, he thought. This was no longer about a missed flight. This was about a TSA officer who'd decided a black surgeon was suspicious and couldn't back down when proven wrong. And now it was going to become a federal case. Literally. Detroit police arrived 11 minutes later. 2 officers, one white, mid-40s, sergeant stripes, one black, younger, maybe 32. The black officer took one look at Dr. Washington, still standing in his socks, surrounded by TSA officers, medical license in Whitaker's hand, and his expression shifted through recognition, confusion, and barely concealed anger in about 3 seconds. What's the situation? The sergeant asked. Whitaker launched into his narrative. Subject presented suspicious identification documents. Became argumentative when asked to verify credentials. Attempted to intimidate officers with legal jargon. Refusing to comply with lawful security directives. The sergeant turned to Dr. Washington. Sir, what's your version? I'm Dr. Marcus Washington, spine surgeon at Henry Ford Hospital, he said calmly, gesturing to his hospital ID badge still clipped to his belt. I presented 3 forms of valid identification: medical license, hospital credentials, boarding pass, all matching. I explained I'm traveling to a medical conference with patient records. Officer Whitaker claimed my medical license didn't look right and is now attempting to confiscate it despite having no legal authority to seize state professional licenses. I've cooperated with every lawful directive. 8 passengers have been recording the entire encounter. The sergeant looked at the medical license in Whitaker's hand, looked at the hospital badge, looked at Dr. Washington's carry-on with medical conference materials clearly visible, then looked at the 8 phones still recording. TSA, can I speak with you privately for a moment? The sergeant said to Whitaker. They stepped away. The conversation was brief but heated, the sergeant's body language increasingly frustrated, Whitaker's defensive and rigid. When they returned, the sergeant's tone was professional but cold. Dr. Washington, Officer Whitaker has agreed to return your medical license. You're free to proceed to your gate. I want to file a formal complaint, Dr. Washington said immediately. That's your right, sir. Here's the information for TSA's Office of Civil Rights and the DHS Office of Inspector General. The sergeant handed him a business card. Then lower, almost under his breath. And get yourself a good civil rights attorney. You're going to want one. Dr. Washington collected his belongings, put his shoes back on, refastened his belt, slid his watch back onto his wrist. Each action deliberate, controlled. His medical license, the one Whitaker had held hostage for 17 minutes, went into his inner jacket pocket. It was now 7:09 a.m. His flight to Orlando had departed at 7:15 a.m. Yes, he'd missed it, but he'd gained something far more valuable than a seat on Delta Flight 1247. He'd gained evidence. 8 cameras worth, 40 witnesses, a Detroit police sergeant who'd all but told him to sue. And he had Officer Kenneth Whitaker on camera, violating federal regulations, exceeding his authority, and profiling a black surgeon so blatantly that even other law enforcement recognized it. Dr. Washington walked to the Delta Gate desk, rebooked on the 11:15 a.m. flight. Then he sat down in the terminal, pulled out his phone, and called 3 numbers in sequence. His wife. I'm okay. I'll explain when I get home. But I need you to do something for me. Call David Marks. David Marks was the best civil rights attorney in Michigan. His department chaired Henry Ford. I'm filing a formal complaint and likely a federal lawsuit. As the hospital needs to be aware. And his attorney cousin in Chicago. I need names. Best civil rights litigation firms. Federal cases. Constitutional violations. And I need them today. By the time his 11:15 a.m. flight boarded, Dr. Washington had consulted with 2 law firms, filed preliminary complaints with 3 oversight agencies, and sent the videos to a secure cloud server. He also had something else, a group text from Captain Marcus Reed, Jennifer Kowalski, and 4 other passengers who'd recorded the incident. We're with you, whatever you need. We saw everything. 3 hours and 27 minutes. That's how long Dr. Washington's morning airport routine became a federal civil rights case. But here's what happened in the hours and days after he walked away from that checkpoint. November 14, 2019. At 2:47 p.m., Jennifer Kowalski's 38-second video is posted to Twitter with the caption, TSA agent at Detroit Metro just detained a black surgeon and tried to confiscate his medical license because it looked fake. I have the whole thing on video. This is racial profiling, period. November 14, 2019, 6:23 p.m. Video has 127,000 views. November 15, 2019, 8:15 a.m. Video has 4.2 million views. Hashtag TS. A profiling Dr. Washington is trending nationally. November 15, 2019, 11 a.m. Detroit Free Press, CNN, MSNBC, and NBC. News request interviews. November 15, 2019, 3:47 p.m. TSA releases statement. We take all allegations of misconduct seriously. The incident is under review. November 16, 2019, 9 a.m. Henry Ford Hospital releases statement supporting Dr. Washington, confirming his credentials and calling for full accountability. November 18th. November 22, 2019. Officer Kenneth Whitaker is placed on paid administrative leave, pending investigation. Notice what happened there. Paid administrative leave. Not fired. Not suspended without pay. Not even reassigned. Paid. To stay home. While the investigation proceeds. And here's how long TSA investigations typically take when there's no video evidence. Average time to complete. 18 to 36 months. Complaints without video, 89% closed as unsubstantiated. Officers disciplined, 1.2%. Officers fired, 0.05%. Complaints with video, 71% sustained. Officers disciplined, 43%. Officers fired, 14.5%. 3 years to investigate, less than 0.5% fired, unless there are cameras. Then it's 14%. Sunlight, meet disinfectant. Well, David Marks met with Dr. Washington on November 19th, 5 days after the incident, in his office overlooking the Detroit River. Marks was 61 years old, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. He'd spent 38 years litigating civil rights cases against police departments, federal agencies, and corporations. His walls were covered with photos, him shaking hands with judges, standing beside clients on courthouse steps, accepting awards from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. He'd seen it all, and he was furious. "I've reviewed all 8 videos," Mark said, his South Carolina accent still thick despite 4 decades in Detroit. "I've read the TSA regulations. I've spoken with 3 experts on federal screening authority. Marcus, this is the most clear-cut case of racial profiling I've seen in 15 years. He pulled up the freeze frame of Officer Whitaker holding the medical license to the light. "This moment right here. This is where he violated your Fourth Amendment rights. No reasonable suspicion, no articulable facts, just a black man in an expensive suit, and that was enough." Dr. Washington sat across from him, still wearing his surgical scrubs from that morning's operations. He'd performed 2 spinal fusions since returning from Orlando, saved 2 people from paralysis, then drove straight to this meeting. "What's the timeline?" he asked. "Federal civil rights lawsuit under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983. Deprivation of rights under color of law. We'll file in Eastern District of Michigan within the month. Discovery will take 12 to 18 months. A TSA will offer to settle early. They always do when there's video. The question is whether you're willing to take this the distance." "What does that mean?" Marks leaned forward. "It means they're going to offer you money to go away. 6 figures, maybe low 7 figures, and they'll want a non-disclosure agreement. You take the settlement, you can't talk about what happened. They get to bury this as a resolved personnel matter, and Officer Whitaker keeps his job. What's the alternative? We reject the settlement. We take it to trial. We put Whitaker on the stand under oath. We depose his supervisors. We subpoena his personnel file, all 27 prior complaints. We make TSA explain why a man with a pattern of racial profiling was still working checkpoints. We get a jury verdict. We get public accountability. And they'll come at you with everything they have. They'll audit your taxes. They'll comb through your medical practice looking for any patient complaint. They'll try to find anything, to make you look less than perfect. Because if you're not a perfect victim, the settlement goes down, and their liability goes down." Dr. Washington smiled without humor. "Let them audit. Let them investigate. I've been practicing medicine for 19 years. My taxes are clean. My patient outcomes are top percentile. My record is spotless." He paused. "And even if it wasn't, even if I'd made mistakes, even if I had complaints, even if I was an average surgeon instead of a distinguished one, I'd still have the right to walk through airport security without being treated like a criminal because of my skin color." Marks smiled, a real smile this time. "Then we go to trial, and we make them pay." Here's what most people don't understand about suing the federal government. It's not like suing a person or a company. You can't just file a lawsuit and show up in court. The Federal Tort Claims Act creates a maze of procedural requirements designed to make you give up before you ever see a judge. To sue the TSA, you must 1. File administrative complaint with TSA within 2 years. 2. Wait 6 months for TSA to investigate itself. 3. Receive formal denial. TSA denies 94% of claims. 4. Then file federal lawsuit within 6 months of denial. 5. Survive motion to dismiss government immunity claims. 6. Survive summary judgment, qualified immunity for officers. 7. Then maybe get to trial, Average timeline, 3 to 5 years. Success rate without video, 11%. Success rate with video, 67%. 3 to 5 years of your life. Depositions, motions, discovery, continuances. All while the officer who violated your rights stays on paid leave, collecting a salary, waiting for you to give up. And most people do give up. Because who has 3 years to fight the federal government while still working full-time, raising kids, living life? Dr. Washington did. Because this wasn't about him anymore. It was about every black professional who'd been pulled over in their own neighborhood. Every black doctor questioned in the hospital hallways, "Are you the janitor?" Every black lawyer asked in court, "Are you the defendant?" Every black pilot asked in first class, "Shouldn't you be in the back?" Every successful black person who'd learned that credentials don't protect you from suspicion. That achievement doesn't shield you from profiling. That no matter how many degrees you earn, how many lives you save, how many years you serve, you're still just a black person in a space where someone decided you don't belong. Dr. Washington had 3 daughters. The oldest was applying to medical schools. The youngest was 13. He was fighting this case so that maybe, by the time they became Dr. Washington No. 2 and Dr. Washington No. 3, they wouldn't have to. On December 17, 2019, David Marks filed a federal lawsuit in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan. Marcus A. Washington, Jr., MD v. Transportation Security Administration, et al. Named defendants, TSA Officer Kenneth Whitaker, individually, TSA Detroit Field Director, and the Department of Homeland Security. Claims: violation of Fourth Amendment rights, unlawful detention; violation of 14th Amendment rights, racial profiling; violation of Fifth Amendment rights, deprivation of liberty without due process; and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Damages sought: $15 million compensatory, $10 million punitive. The TSA had 90 days to respond. They responded in 87, with a motion to dismiss. And the government's argument was elegant in its cynicism. Officer Whitaker had qualified immunity. He was performing his duties in good faith based on his training and experience. Even if Dr. Washington's rights were violated, the law wasn't clearly established enough for Whitaker to know he was violating them. In other words, yes, we detained a black surgeon for being suspicious. But racial profiling law is so murky that our officer couldn't reasonably be expected to know that confiscating a medical license without cause was illegal. David Marks filed a 90-page response citing 47 cases, establishing that racial profiling violates clearly established constitutional rights. Judge Sarah Montgomery, a black woman appointed by President Obama, denied the motion to dismiss in 15 pages. A key quote from her ruling: "The court finds that no reasonable officer could conclude that detaining a passenger for 17 minutes, confiscating professional credentials without statutory authority, and calling law enforcement for refusing to comply, when the undisputed video evidence shows full compliance, constitutes legitimate security screening. Qualified immunity does not shield officers from accountability for racial profiling, so blatant it was captured from 8 camera angles." The case proceeded to discovery. Discovery, February 2020 to August 2021. David Marks subpoenaed everything: Officer Whitaker's complete personnel file, 27 prior complaints, 19 involving allegations of racial profiling. It's all marked training issue resolved or unsubstantiated. TSA training materials on behavioral indicators that included terms like overdressed for purpose of travel and credential inconsistency. Internal communications between TSA supervisors discussing the incident. All body camera and checkpoint footage from November 14, 2019. The most damning discovery? An email from Whitaker to a colleague 2 weeks before the Dr. Washington incident. Caught another one trying to play doctor today. Black guy, expensive suit. Says he's an orthopedic surgeon. Right. Had fake hospital badge and everything. These frauds are getting better at forgeries. The fraudulent surgeon? Verified as Dr. James Morrison, actual orthopedic surgeon at Beaumont Hospital, traveling to a conference in Phoenix. TSA had paid him $175,000 to settle his complaint. and with an NDA. So nobody knew there was a pattern. Settlement negotiations. September 2021 to February 2022. The offer started at $300,000. Dr. Washington rejected it. $750,000. Rejected. $1.2 million. Rejected. Each time, TSA added one condition: non-disclosure agreement. Dr. Washington couldn't talk about the case, couldn't discuss the settlement, couldn't tell other victims there was a pattern. Each time, Dr. Washington said the same thing: I'm not interested in money, I'm interested in accountability. Finally, in February 2022, TSA made their final offer: $2.8 million. No NDA required. Officer Whitaker terminated. TSA agrees to policy reforms including independent oversight of profiling complaints. David Marks recommended accepting it. Marcus, this is a good result. You've held them accountable. Whitaker's fired. You get monetary compensation. We can move forward. Dr. Washington considered it for 48 hours, then said, No, we're going to trial. I want a jury to hear what happened. I want 12 citizens to decide whether what TSA did was acceptable, and I want a verdict, not a settlement. Mark stared at him for a long moment, then smiled. All right then, let's go to trial. Trial. March 2023, United States District Court, Eastern District of Michigan. Judge, Honorable Sarah Montgomery. Plaintiff's Counsel, David Marks. Defense Counsel, Department of Justice Trial, Attorney Rebecca Chen. The trial lasted 8 days. Day 1 to 2, video evidence. All 8 angles. Played for the jury. Jennifer Kowalski testified. Captain Reed testified. Dr. Sarah Chen testified. The jury: 7 women, 5 men, 4 black, 3 white, 2 Asian, 2 Hispanic, 1 Middle Eastern, watched in silence as Officer Whitaker held the medical license to the light, declared it fake, called for backup. Day 3 to 4. Expert testimony. Dr. Kenneth Barnes, former TSA training director, testified that nothing in Dr. Washington's behavior, documents, or demeanor justified enhanced screening. Dr. Patricia Williams, social psychologist, testified about implicit bias and status threat. Day 5 to 6, Officer Whitaker took the stand. He was a disaster. David Marks walked him through every prior complaint, every unsubstantiated allegation, every black passenger he'd detained for suspicious credentials. Cross-examination excerpt. Marks: Officer Whitaker, Dr. Washington presented you with a state medical license. Did you attempt to verify it through Michigan's online licensing database? Whitaker: I don't recall. Marks: You don't recall whether you checked the database or you didn't check the database? Whitaker: I used my judgment based on my experience. Marks: That's not what I asked. Did you check the database, yes or no? Whitaker: No. Marks: You called Detroit police and reported fraudulent identification without even attempting basic verification? Whitaker: I assessed the situation. Marks: You assessed that a black man with a medical license, hospital badge, and boarding pass was suspicious. What specifically made him suspicious, officer? Whitaker: Long pause. His behavior. Marks: What behavior? He stood still with his hands visible. He answered every question. He provided every document requested. What? About behavior? Whitaker: No answer. Marks: Was it his expensive suit? Defense: Objection. Marks: Was it his articulate speech? His medical terminology? The fact that he knew TSA regulations better than you did? Defense: Objection, argumentative. Marks: Or was it simply that he was a successful black man, and in your experience, successful black men are suspicious? The courtroom went silent. Judge Montgomery: You may answer the question, Officer Whitaker. Whitaker: I was doing my job. Marks: Your job is racial profiling? Whitaker: No, My job is security screening. Marks. Of black professionals who dare to travel through your checkpoint looking successful. No further questions. Day 7 to 8, closing arguments. David Marks spoke for 47 minutes. He walked the jury through the videos, the timeline, the violations, the pattern of complaints. He ended with this. Dr. Marcus Washington committed one crime that morning. He traveled while black and accomplished. And for that, Officer Whitaker decided he was guilty until proven innocent. Guilty until his credentials were verified. Guilty until he could prove he belonged in that expensive suit, in that first-class line, in a profession that Officer Whitaker apparently didn't believe black men could achieve. The question you have to answer is simple. Is that America? Is that the country we've built? Where your credentials matter less than your skin color? Where possible fraudulent identification is code for looks too successful to be real? Dr. Washington isn't asking you to change the system. He's asking you to hold one officer accountable for abusing it. To say that racial profiling isn't security. Yep, it's discriminations. And in the United States of America, discrimination has a price. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. March 24th, 2023, 3:47 p.m. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. Dr. Washington sat at the plaintiff's table, absolutely still. His wife squeezed his hand under the table. His 3 daughters sat in the first row behind him. All 3 had taken off work and school to be there. On the claim of violation of Fourth Amendment rights, unlawful detention and seizure, how do you find? We find in favor of the plaintiff, Dr. Marcus Washington. On the claim of racial profiling and violation of 14th Amendment equal protection rights? In favor of the plaintiff. On the claim of intentional infliction of emotional distress? In favor of the plaintiff. Have you reached a determination on damages? We have, Your Honor. The jury forewoman, a 62-year-old black woman who'd worked as a nurse for 40 years, who'd watched Dr. Washington's testimony with tears in her eyes, unfolded the verdict form. Compensatory damages, $2.7 million. Dr. Washington closed his eyes. Punitive damages assessed against Officer Kenneth Whitaker personally, $1.5 million. The courtroom erupted. Judge Montgomery gabbled for order. Total award, $4.2 million, the largest single plaintiff TSA racial profiling verdict in Michigan history. Dr. Washington didn't smile. It didn't celebrate. He stood when the judge dismissed the jury, turned to thank each juror personally as they filed out. The jury forewoman hugged him. My son's a doctor too, she said quietly. He was pulled over 3 times last year driving to the hospital. I watched you on that stand and I saw my son. I saw every black professional who's ever had to prove they belong. I'm sorry this happened to you. It wasn't just for me, Dr. Washington said. It was for your son too. David Marks stood at the microphone with Dr. Washington beside him. Today, 12 citizens unanimously declared that racial profiling is not security screening. It's discrimination, and it comes with a $4.2 million price tag. Reporters shouted questions. Dr. Washington, how do you feel about the verdict? He stepped to the microphone, paused, chose his words carefully. The money doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't give me back those 17 minutes. It doesn't undo what my daughter saw in that video. Their father treated like a criminal for carrying a stethoscope and a medical license. But it sends a message. To every TSA officer who thinks discretion means racial profiling. To every federal agent who thinks qualified immunity is a shield for discrimination. To every person in authority who looks at a successful black person and sees suspicion instead of achievement. We see you. We're recording you. And we will hold you accountable. Officer Whitaker violated my constitutional rights because he couldn't imagine a black man being a surgeon. The jury just told him that his imagination failure cost $4.2 million. Now, that's accountability. Officer Kenneth Whitaker, consequences terminated, April 17, 2021, during settlement negotiations before trial. Pension, forfeited, terminated for cause. Federal employment, permanently banned. DHS Office of Inspector General flagged him system-wide. Personal bankruptcy. Filed August 2023. Couldn't pay $1.5 million punitive damages. Wages garnished 25% for life. Current employment. Security guard, Southland Mall, Taylor, Michigan. $16.50 per hour. 21 years of federal service. Pension gone. Career destroyed. Financially ruined. Because he couldn't imagine a black man in an expensive suit being exactly what he claimed to be. TSA. Policy changes. Settlement agreement, March 2023. Independent Oversight Board. All racial profiling complaints now reviewed by Civilian Oversight Panel. Not internal TSA affairs mandatory. Implicit bias training. Annual requirement for all 900+ D TWTSA officers, developed by University of Michigan professors. Professional credential verification protocol. Officers must verify professional licenses through official databases before questioning legitimacy. Body camera mandate. All passenger interactions over 3 minutes must be recorded. Suspicious credential. Ban. Officers can no longer detain passengers for having credentials that seem inconsistent without articulable security facts. These policies later expanded. TSA-wide under a 2024 DHS directive. $4.2 million. Largest single plaintiff TSA racial profiling verdict in Michigan history. But let's be honest about what that money bought. $4.2 million breakdown. Legal fees, 33% plus costs. $1.5 million. Taxes, federal plus state, $1.1 million, doctor. Washington receives $1.6 million, paid by American taxpayers, paid by Officer Whitaker, $0, bankruptcy protection. TSA funding reduced, $0. Dr. Washington got justice, got accountability, got policy changes. But Officer Whitaker? He declared bankruptcy. The $1.5 million punitive damages? Dischargeable. He'll pay 25% of his $16.50 per hour wage for life, about $8,500 per year. He'll be dead before he pays $200,000. The rest? Paid by you, the taxpayer. This is the problem with suing the government for civil rights violations. The people who commit them rarely pay the price. The taxpayers do. And the system that enabled them? Still intact. But here's what Dr. Washington's case did accomplish. TSA civilian oversight boards now exist in 47 major airports. Implicit bias training is now mandatory. TSA-wide, 127 TSA officers with pattern of complaint histories were reassigned or terminated after his case triggered systemic reviews. The Professional Credential Verification Protocol has prevented an estimated 2,800 similar detentions, according to ACLU. Tracking 2023 to 2025. Dr. Washington didn't just win his case, he changed the system. Not completely, not perfectly, but 2,800 black professionals didn't have to stand in an airport in their socks, proving they had the right to exist in first class. 2,800 families didn't have to watch their parent/spouse/child get detained for looking suspicious. 2,800 Officer Whitakers were stopped before they could act on their biases. That's not nothing. But 3 years later, Dr. Marcus Washington still practices at Henry Ford, still performs spinal surgeries, still saves lives. He used his $1.6 million settlement to establish the Washington Civil Rights Documentation Fund, a nonprofit that provides free legal support, documentation training, and expert witnesses for victims of racial profiling by federal agencies. Since 2023, the fund has supported 284 civil rights lawsuits, trained over 15,000 people in their rights during federal law enforcement encounters, created the Know Your Rights app, downloaded 1.2 million times, won or settled 89% of cases they supported. Average settlement, $340,000. He speaks at medical schools across the country. Not about surgery, about dignity. about the tax successful black professionals pay just for existing in spaces where people don't expect them. His oldest daughter, Jessica, is now a third-year medical student at Spelman. She's going into orthopedic surgery, like her father. When asked if she worries about facing what he faced, he tells her, "You shouldn't have to, but if you do, record everything. Stand your ground, know your rights, and never, never let anyone make you believe you don't belong in a space you've earned the right to occupy. Your credentials are real. Your achievements are real. Your dignity is non-negotiable. And if someone tries to take that from you, there's $4.2 million worth of legal precedent that says they'll pay for it." His youngest daughter, Maya, asked him once, "Dad, was it worth it? 3 years of court? All that stress? Reliving it over and over?" He thought about it for a long time, then said, "I didn't do it for the money, baby. I did it so that the next time a TSA officer sees a black surgeon in an expensive suit, he'll remember Officer Whitaker. He'll remember what happened when racial profiling met accountability. And maybe, he'll think twice before deciding that success and black skin can't possibly go together. That's worth every minute." If you believe credentials should matter more than skin color, share this story. If you think settlements should come from those who violate rights, not taxpayers, comment below with your solutions. And if you've ever been profiled, detained, or made to prove you belong in a space you earned, drop your story in the comments. Dr. Washington fought so you wouldn't have to. But until the system changes, the fight continues. We see you, we believe you, and we're documenting everything.